Buying your first home is one of the biggest financial steps you'll ever take, but it's easy to make mistakes that can cost you time, stress, money, and more. But in today's video, I'm going to be talking you through the most common mistakes that first-time buyers make, and most importantly, how you can avoid them. But first up, if you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button because you'll want to see my next video where I'm going to be sharing some practical tips on how you can boost your credit score quickly as a first-time buyer. So make sure you subscribe. Let's get into today's video. So the first mistake is not getting pre-approved for a mortgage. Now, this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see oftentimes, and the reason why is because first-time buyers are eager, they've saved up maybe a bit of money, then they go out house hunting, maybe even put in a few offers, only to later on find out that they're outside of their price bracket, okay? Now, you don't want to fall in love with a property that you're not confident you can actually afford. And if you watched my last video, you'll know that I spoke about the importance of having a clear, defined budget when it comes to your savings goal. Now, that mortgage pre-approval is going to help you with that because it will give you a clear idea, not just how much you think you can afford based on your deposit size, but how much you're realistically going to be able to borrow from lenders when it comes to the mortgage process, right? You want to figure that out up front. So getting pre-approved gives you a clear idea on how much you can borrow, right? It gives you the parameters. It gives you an idea to know what types of houses are within your price range and the ones that are outside of it, right? And here's another thing. It actually shows sellers and agents that you're much more serious, okay? Because if you do find a dream house when you're out on viewings and you do decide to put in an offer, right? One of the things that's going to help you to skip a lot of the mess is having that pre-approval in place, right? That way you're not going to be in a position where you set your heart on a home and because you didn't have the formalities taken care of, you're not able to secure the deal, right? So for the next mistake, let's talk about additional costs. Now, this is a very common mistake that I see first-time buyers make. Why? Because they focus solely on saving up the deposit, not taking into account that there are other costs involved with buying your first property, right? So I'm talking about things like legal fees, broker fees, even things like moving costs, right? Think about the practicalities of moving home. You will have to pay for removal services or pay for fuel or pay for some sort of transport to take your goods from where you are to where you're going to be living, right? The other thing you want to think about is things like appliances. Sometimes you buy houses that come with things, but if it doesn't already come with a washing machine, a dishwasher, a cooker, or whatever goods that you're going to need to live, you need to account for that in your budget, right? And these are the kind of things you want to prepare on up front so that you can define not just the amount you need to save up for your deposit, but make sure you have enough to finish, because we've all seen that meme where you had enough to buy the house, but you spend a good while in the house empty because you couldn't afford to furnish it, right? You don't want to be that person. So the next mistake is not doing enough research on the area. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to buying a property, location is everything, right? But the other thing you need to realize is that you're not just buying the house, you are also investing in a community, right? So you want to take time to actually visit the area at different times of the day. And that's a very important point, right? Because the house might seem like it's in a dreamy area because you visit it at a time of day when it's absolutely peace, sunshine, and skittles. But if you come back in the evening time to the same location, for all you know, you might start realizing that there's a lot of noise. You might realize that the neighbors are a bit more untoward than you expected, right? So visiting at different times of the day, being able to kind of get an idea of what the environment's like, looking up what the local amenities are like, right? Local schools, if that's something that's going to affect you in terms of children and things like that too. You want to really take time to understand not just whether the home is a good fit, but whether the actual area itself is a good fit too. Now, the fourth mistake is letting emotions drive the decision. Now, I'm telling you, buying a home can be a very, very emotional experience, okay? But if you allow emotions to drive the decision, it can lead to very expensive and costly mistakes. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of finding a home that is nicely furnished, a home that you fell in love with, and a place that you can see yourself building your family and living your dreams, right? But the problem is if you get too emotional in that decision-making process, you could find yourself overlooking very, very serious issues, okay? So you really want to make sure that you are making decisions based on logic and facts, not just feelings, okay? I'm not saying ignore your feelings altogether, but I'm saying don't let your feelings lead in the decision-making process. Take a step back, consider all of the factors, and look, don't be afraid to walk away from a deal if there's something you're not comfortable with, okay? I know first time buying, it can feel like this is the only home there ever will be, but trust me, houses come and go on the market. It's a cycle that continuously revolves. So you will find another property if you let that one go. Now, on to mistake number 5, it is not getting a proper survey done. Now, skipping the home survey or maybe even going for the cheapest option is one of those mistakes that can cost you big time, right? But first up, what is a survey? I mean, if you're a first-time buyer, this might be something you're not familiar with, right? So a survey is essentially a detailed inspection of the property that you're planning to buy. So a professional surveyor will come and visit the property and they'll look for all sorts of potential issues like structural problems, damp. We're talking about even possibly issues with the roof, right? All these types of things they'll include in a specific and detailed report and essentially do a house health check. Kind of like what you would do if you were getting a car, right? You'd want someone to do a little once over, make sure it's mechanically sound so that you don't end up spending a lot of money on a car that ends up failing you later on down the line, right? It's just like that with houses, right? The surveyor's job is to look at the property, assess it, identify as many problems as possible, and list those things inside of a report that you can rely on to start recognizing what the true picture of the property is. Because once you have this report, if there are problems with the property that you can see, that can then potentially become a point that you use to negotiate on and reduce the price that you've agreed. Or alternatively, it might be problems that are so big that you decide to say, you know what, I'm not willing to take on the risk, I'm going to walk away from this deal, right? Now look, skipping this step can be tempting because it will save you a few £100s up front, but the reality is, in the long run, it could cost you thousands, if not hundreds of thousands later on down the line, right? And that's because you don't want to end up buying a property blind, finding out about expensive repairs later on, and not having any choice but to deal with it out of pocket, right? So make sure you take the time to spend that little bit more up front to get the survey done so you've got a lot more confidence in what you're buying. Now, sidebar, in my last video, I mentioned about having a budget and a defined amount that you know you're working towards when it comes to your deposit. If you missed that video, make sure you go back and watch it after this one. But budgets are coming back to this video too, right? Because the next mistake is overstretching your budget, right? Now, here's the thing. Maybe you were smart enough to get a pre-approval for a mortgage, right? Maybe you've done the work to save up the deposit and now you found out that you can afford to borrow £300,000, let's just say, right? Insert the figure according to your local area, right? Now, just because you can afford to borrow that from the banks, it doesn't mean that you should stretch it to the max, right? Because ultimately, it's not going to make much sense for you to borrow all the way to the maximum if it means that you can't really afford to keep up with those monthly mortgage payments on top of your living expenses. And this is one of the places where having a good mortgage advisor is helpful, because one of the things that we do up front is help you to plan to make sure you don't overstretch yourself to the limit. So make sure you stick to a budget that allows you to comfortably afford the mortgage payments while still enjoying your life, okay? The last thing you want to do is become house poor, where all of your money that you earn goes into your home, leaving you with little left for anything else. So let's run it back and recap. So number 1, you want to get pre-approved. Number 2, you want to make sure you budget for additional costs. Next up, you want to take the time to research the area thoroughly. Go and do visits in the day, in the night, and on different days of the week. Keep your emotions in check, get a proper survey done, and don't overstretch your budget. Avoiding these mistakes will set you on the path to successfully buying your first home. And look, buying your first home doesn't have to be overwhelming, right? Because with the right knowledge, a bit of planning, you can avoid pitfalls just like this one and make sure that you make smart investments when it comes to your future. And remember, if you need a little bit more help, you've got questions or want personalized advice, hit the link in the description, book a call with me today, and we can have a little chat about your situation. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button, because it helps me to know that I'm making good and useful videos that you find useful. And it also helps YouTube know to send this video out to more people just like you so that they can get the free help they need as first-time buyers too. And if you are new here or you haven't done so already, make sure you hit the subscribe button, especially because in my next video, I will be talking about some practical tips that you can implement right away to help improve your credit score. And for you, that means better interest rates when it comes to applying for mortgages and actually lower monthly mortgage repayments, okay? So you get to save money just by that information, okay? See you in the next video.